Mrs. Washington's face was pale, and she slumped on the stage instantly. She never dreamed that her momentary cleverness would have ruined this golden opportunity for good. Had she known this situation a long time ago, she would not have allowed Hanks to replace Cynthia's directorship. Hanks was also very at a loss this time. What's the matter? It seemed that Doris Young deliberately targeted him, and he did not even offend her. Hanks couldn't help asking Mrs. Washington, "Grandma, the director's appointment has been announced, and you won't regret it?" Mrs. Washington struggled to stand up, raised her hand, and slapped him, angrily scolding, "Bastard. You still don't want to miss the directorship, even at such a time." After Paul went out, he realized that Cynthia hadn't gone far. She was just squatting in an unmanned corner next to the hotel, crying aggrievedly. He slowly approached, took off his coat, put it on Cynthia, and said, "My wife, don't be sad. The director of the Washington family is not a treasure. It's inappropriate for your family to treat you like that. You don't understand. If I become the director, my parents will be able to hold their heads high in the Washington family. How can Grandma turn back?" Cynthia whimpered. Paul continued to persuade, "Maybe they will have to come and beg you to be the director. You are crying like this now, and you won't look pretty after a while on stage." Cynthia choked and said, "How is it possible? Grandma has said everything, and there will be no chance of turning back. Leave me, let me be alone." At this moment, Mrs. Washington and Hanks also ran out of the banquet hall. Mrs. Washington was too old and out of breath when she ran. A large group of people behind her came out to watch the scene in excitement. After Hanks came out, he saw Paul and Cynthia. He ran forward quickly, looked down at Cynthia with dim eyes, and blurted out, "Cynthia, hurry up and chase Miss Doris. Let her not terminate cooperation with us." Cynthia looked blank. Terminate cooperation? Why? Hanks said angrily, "You are here pretending to be innocent. You must have instructed Miss Doris to embarrass me publicly. I can't spare you if you don't settle this matter for me." Smack! Mrs. Washington, who was on the side, slapped Hanks angrily again and said, "You bastard. How can you talk to your sister like that? She is the director of our Washington group." Hanks was anxious. "Didn't Grandma choose me as the director?" Mrs. Washington said angrily, "If you hadn't given me ecstasy, how could I change my mind temporarily? If you continue to be reluctant, you will get out of the Washington family." After being slapped twice by his grandma, Hanks was extremely angry, but he dared not speak, so he could only swallow his anger temporarily. Mrs. Washington said to Cynthia again at this time, "Cynthia, Grandma begs you. You are now the director of the Washington family. Hurry up and explain to Miss Doris, otherwise, our Washington family will be in ruins." Cynthia looked at Paul blankly with doubts. Paul shrugged and said, "I told you, they would have to come and beg you to be the director in a while. You didn't believe me. Look, your face is all messed up." Cynthia blushed, wiped her tears, and said, "Then I will try to contact him grand." After speaking, she dialed Doris Young's phone. Everyone's eyes focused on her. After a while, the phone was connected, and Cynthia said, "Hello, Miss Doris. Grandma asked me to explain to you, I will be promoted to the director of the Washington group, responsible for the cooperation with him grand. Can you give us another chance?" Doris Young chuckled and said, "If you are the director and can take charge, then there is no problem. The cooperation can continue, but if it is someone else, everything stays at the current status." Miss Doris, thank you so much. Cynthia was always puzzled about this matter in her heart. From beginning to end, the Grand group seemed to be here entirely to help her, which was too abnormal. Doris Young said with a smile, "This is what our chairman meant. If there is a chance in the future, the chairman will explain it to you personally." Cynthia was even more puzzled. Who was the chairman of the other party? She had never seen him. Why did the other party help her everywhere? Then, can you please return to the banquet hall again? Cynthia asked nervously. Doris had left with anger, obviously irritated by the Washington family. At this time, asking her to come back was a bit difficult. But she didn't expect that Doris Young agreed resolutely. Soon everyone saw that Doris Young's car had returned to the door of the hotel. At this moment, everyone looked at Cynthia with gazes filled with horror and awe. When everyone returned to the banquet hall, Mrs. Washington took Cynthia's hand on the stage. With an intimate gesture, she said, "I'm really sorry for what happened just now. It was my mistake. In fact, it's thanks to Cynthia this time. She is an outstanding descendant of our Washington family." This cooperation between the Washington family and Grand resulted from Cynthia's efforts. She really made great efforts. Doris Young stood by her side, glanced at her disdainfully, and waved her hand to stop her from speaking further. She said, "I will correct that." In this cooperation, Mrs. Cynthia not only made great efforts, but it is entirely made possible by her, and has nothing to do with anyone else. This was extremely rude, but everyone was accustomed to it. With Grand's status, even if Doris Young slapped Mrs. Washington in public, she would not dare say anything. Mrs. Washington quickly nodded and said, "Vice Chair Doris is right. The credit goes to Cynthia. From now on, Cynthia will be the director of the Washington family's business, fully responsible for the cooperation between the Washington family and Grand Group." Doris Young showed a slight smile and shook hands with Cynthia, saying, "I hope we can cooperate happily in the future." Cynthia was still a little at a loss and could only nod her confused head. The audience burst into thunderous applause, and everyone looked at Cynthia with eyes full of enthusiasm. This woman was on the list. The Grand Group treats her so seriously. Cynthia herself was also confused. She turned her head to look at Paul. The situation at this time was exactly the same as what Paul had just said. Mrs. Washington returned the position of director that should belong to her. Until the banquet was over, Cynthia was still in a daze after returning home. Recalling what Paul had said before, she couldn't help but feel a little puzzled. In the past few days, Paul seemed to have become a little different. There seemed to be many things about him that she didn't understand, like they were covered by layers of mist. That night, Cynthia became famous in Aurous Hill. Everyone knew that there was an outstanding lady from the Washington family, and the Grand Group was backing her. It seemed that with her, the revitalization of the Washington family was just around the corner. The next morning, Cynthia woke up early and hurried to the company, feeling refreshed. Today was her first day as a director. She hoped that she could go all out to do this job well. After Paul got up, he started to do housework as always. When Paul finished his housework and was about to go to the vegetable market to buy vegetables for lunch, he suddenly received a call from his mother-in-law Elaine. After answering the call, his mother-in-law's extremely anxious voice came from the other end, "Paul, within 10 minutes, you must rush to Safe Road for me, otherwise I won't spare you when I get home." After that, she hung up the phone. Paul was confused. His mother-in-law hadn't said anything early in the morning. At this moment, she called suddenly, as if something urgent had happened. Although Paul was very disgusted with his mother-in-law, he did not dare to neglect her orders. After hurriedly cleaning up, he went out to take a taxi and rushed to Safe Road. When he got out of the car, he saw a group of grandpas and aunts surrounded aggressively at the door of a closed insurance company. His mother-in-law stood at the forefront of the team, holding a banner in her hand, shouting angrily, "Rubbish Harley! Fake platform! We want our rights! Pay back my hard-earned money!" Paul hurriedly stepped forward and asked, "Mom, you called me over, what's the matter?" As he was speaking, the condemning slogans sounded in his ear again. The grandfathers and aunts shouted hoarsely, ringing the eardrums of the passers-by. Elaine pulled Paul over, asked him to take her place, and then ordered, Come on, shout this slogan for me. I've been yelling it all morning, and my voice has become hoarse." Paul didn't know why, but he could only protest with a few uncles and aunts. While shouting slogans, he inquired with an uncle next to him from time to time, and then he understood what was going on. It turned out that this Harley Insurance Company Limited offered insurance products with extremely high return rates. The elderly were attracted by the high rate of return, and everyone bought a lot of insurance products under the company's name, becoming their customers. This was the fixed time to pay dividends. Unexpectedly, when these elders and aunts came to withdraw cash, they discovered that the door of the company was closed, and only a few employees were at the door, using botched excuses to prevaricate everyone. This gang of grandpas and aunts realized that they were deceived by an empty promise. No wonder his mother-in-law wanted to call him over in a hurry and asked him to participate with her. Thinking of this, Paul felt overwhelmed and couldn't help but ask his mother-in-law, "Mom, how much insurance did you buy?" Elaine said anxiously, "They told me that buying the insurance products would bring me a lot of dividends." My head got dizzy, and I bought all of their products with all the money from home. Paul was taken aback. "What? All the money from home used to buy insurance?" After hearing this, Elaine immediately became irritated and cursed. "Do you think I am not embarrassed enough? Why speak so loudly?" As she spoke, she continued her rant. "If you had brought me some profit, I would not have bought the products of this insurance company. With a waste son-in-law like you at home, what else were my options for the money at home? This guy, it's okay when he does not support the family. But now he is laughing at her, as if he'd made fortunes with that money." Immediately, she said to Paul, "I am telling you, keep chanting slogans here to help me. You can't stop for a moment." Paul couldn't help but nod and said, "Okay, Mom." At this moment, some people came over, looked up and down at Paul, then asked Elaine, "Sister Elaine, is this your son-in-law?" As they spoke, they scanned Paul's clothes again, shook their heads, and laughed. "Why does he look so poor? He does not look like son-in-law material from any angle. Yes, this dress is worn too many times. It can't compare to that of his mother-in-law." Some people are so good at disparaging and ridiculing others with harsh words. Paul didn't care. They were all old ladies who had fallen into the soil up to half of their bodies. Now they have lost their savings for a lifetime, so he doesn't need to exchange words with them. Elaine was also very angry at this time, and the more she looked at Paul, the more unpleasant he seemed to her. She blurted out, "Look at him, I will let my daughter divorce him in a few days. Change her future with a new son-in-law." Paul sneered in his heart. Even if you add up the rich second generations of Aurous Hill, they can't compare to half his finger. Elaine was anxiously worried at this time. Paul was a waste, and at most, he could shout slogans for her. If she wants her investment back, she still needs someone with real ability to come and help solve it. It's a pity that Kingsley Jones's family, who has been pursuing her daughter, has gone bankrupt. Otherwise, she could ask them to help. Correct. Elaine suddenly remembered that Kelvin's brother, Jack, whom she met at the family banquet yesterday, is her hope. Judging from his attitude towards her daughter at the time, it is estimated that he had some thoughts about Cynthia. Although the Blue family is not as good as the previous Jones family, it is still a big family. If she calls him over, there should be a way. It just so happened that Jack Blue left his business card yesterday, so she took her phone out and dialed Jack's number. The call got connected soon. Elaine said, "Hey, is it Jack? This is Cynthia's mother." Ever since Jack Blue saw Cynthia at the banquet, he was smitten and never forgot about her. He was worried that he had no chance to get close to Cynthia, and it just so happened that Cynthia's mother called him herself. He speculated that Elaine was in trouble, and of course, he would not let go of this opportunity for courtesy. So, he immediately greeted politely, "Aunt Elaine, is everything okay?" "Well, there is something Auntie needs your help with." Elaine hurriedly said, "Jack, a few old ladies and I bought some wealth management products from an insurance company called Harley, and the wealth of the family has been invested in it. But now this company does not allow withdrawals. Can you find a way to help Auntie get the money back?" After listening, Jack was overjoyed. He felt that it was time to perform and said confidently, "Auntie, don't worry, I will come to you now, and I will definitely help you solve this matter." Elaine was immediately excited and hurriedly said, "Thank you so much." Hanging up the phone, she looked at Paul again and said angrily, "Some people don't have any abilities and can't be counted on. Besides shouting two slogans, what are they good for? Utterly useless." Paul sneered after listening. This mother-in-law was really snobbish and blind. She called Jack for help. This company has defrauded at least tens of millions or more of funds. Those who dare to swindle so much money must have a very strong backing. It is even possible that they are bigwigs in the underground world. How could Jack Blue make scammers return the money? The Blue family's strength is very average. After the M. Grand Group ceased cooperation, its strength has shrunk even more. With the Blue family's background, it is basically impossible to interfere in such a large financial fraud. In fact, this little matter could be solved immediately by calling Isaac Craven from Shangri-La. After all, he is the spokesperson of the Wade family in Aurous Hill, and any Aurous Hill entrepreneur or big figure in black and white must give him enough face. However, my mother-in-law is really hateful. Since she believes in Jack Blue, let Jack Blue help her. Let's see what he can do for her." When someone saw Elaine make a phone call, they immediately smiled, and surrounded her, asking if she had found any important figure to help them out. Elaine proudly said to a group of old ladies and men around her, "Don't worry, I asked the eldest master of the Blue family to come and help. He will make some calls, and our hard-earned money will be returned, hopefully." Someone exclaimed, "The eldest young master of the Blue family? Sister, you are great to find such a great personality." "Yes, then young Mr. Blue must have a lot of contacts. To solve our problem, isn't it just a matter of a few words? Sister, since you have such good contacts, why didn't you marry your daughter to someone like him, instead of giving your daughter to this shit?" Elaine glanced at Paul disdainfully and snorted coldly, "This kind of waste will be swept out by our Washington family sooner or later." Paul didn't say a word, planning to wait for Jack Blue to see how he hit the wall. Soon, a black Porsche slowly stopped in front of everyone. A young man in a suit and leather shoes with seemingly handsome looks came out of the car. "Jack Blue is here." The old men and women all around were sighing, "Oh, look at him, this is a young talent. Such a good son-in-law, I don't know whose daughter will be lucky enough to be his wife in the future. Yeah. If my daughter could marry him, I would die of happiness." "Bah, stop dreaming. Even if you die, he won't consider your girl." At this moment, Elaine saw Jack Blue at once and immediately ran forward, saying eagerly, "Oh, Jack, you are here, your aunt is going to die." Jack Blue smiled and said, "Auntie, I'm sorry, I have kept you waiting." Elaine hurriedly said, "Oh, Jack, you are so polite. Auntie didn't wait for 10 minutes. You came so fast." Jack smiled and said, "I heard that you were in trouble, so I drove over and ran through several red lights along the way." Elaine looked smug but asked with concern, "Isn't it troublesome to run so many red lights?" "No," Jack said calmly, "the traffic team in the city are all acquaintances, and a phone call can eliminate any violation." After speaking, Jack said again, "Let's talk about you. How much money have you been cheated of?" Elaine sighed and said, "A total of 1 million has been invested. It is said that this month's dividends can get 200,000, but the principal cannot be raised." Jack nodded and said boisterously, "Don't worry, I will handle this matter. If I go out, I will definitely help you get the money back." After speaking, he suddenly saw Paul standing behind Elaine, and his face changed slightly. Unexpectedly, Paul, an eye-catching waist, was there. Since seeing Cynthia, Jack can't stop thinking of her. After hearing his younger brother Kelvin say that Cynthia should still be single, this thought in his heart became even stronger. Therefore, seeing Cynthia's rubbish husband, he naturally sneered. He deliberately smiled and said, "Oh, Brother Wade is here. Do you have a way to help Aunt Elaine get back the investment? Or do you want to give it a try first? You won't turn around and blame me for stealing your limelight." Elaine hurriedly said, "Let him try a bullshit. What can he do to help? He can just open his mouth and help shout some slogans. Jack, leave him alone." Jack nodded and said sarcastically, "Since Paul doesn't have this ability, then I will give it a try." Paul smiled slightly and said, "Mr. Jack, come on, you can do it." Jack laughed disdainfully. At this time, the gang of grandpas and aunts around Elaine gathered one by one, chanting to Elaine, and said, "Elaine, can you let this little handsome guy also help us? All of us were cheated of hard-earned money." Elaine arrogantly said, "Oh, I can't ask him for that. Jack is giving me a favor, but he doesn't know you." Others pleaded with Jack, "Mr. Jack, you are so great, please help us too." Jack dismissed them but saw that Elaine loves petty things and cheapness, so he smiled and said, "Since everyone is Aunt's friends, then I can do you a favor." When everyone was overjoyed, Jack looked arrogantly and said, "It's just that I am helping you because of Aunt Elaine. Therefore, you must pay Aunt 10% of the money if I help you recover it. Is that acceptable?" They hurriedly said, "No problem. It's a lot better to get a return of 90% than nothing." As soon as Elaine heard this, she was immediately happy. The money adds up to tens of millions considering all. If Jack can really help get it back, wouldn't she make millions? Just when Elaine was very excited, Jack said loudly, "Uncles and aunts, don't worry, I will go to communicate with them now, just wait for the good news." Elaine felt that she was backed by Jack Blue at this moment, and no one dared to provoke her, so she immediately blurted out, "Jack, I will come with you." Paul hurriedly said to Elaine, "Mom, you'd better not go there and join in the fun. In case Jack can't solve this matter, you may be in trouble." "Huh?" Elaine said angrily, "Do you dare to question Mr. Jack's abilities?" The other aunts and grandpas were all expecting that Jack could help them get back their hard-earned money, and now Paul actually sang against everyone, naturally causing dissatisfaction. In the face of countless people's accusations, Paul said calmly, "Mom, it's okay for you to wait here. It's best not to join the negotiations." Elaine couldn't hear it at all and immediately cursed, "Shut your stinky mouth. Is this the place for you to speak?" Jack's face was also full of arrogance, and he laughed and said, "You're not good at it, but your jealousy is not small. Do you think I'm just like you, rubbish who just opens his mouth and shouts slogans?" Seeing that his mother-in-law did not listen to his persuasion, Paul didn't speak any more and said lightly, "Okay, then I am waiting for the good news from Mr. Jack." To his mother-in-law Elaine, Paul is getting on her nerves. She is too snobbish but often blinded by appearances. To put it plainly, she is like Lady Washington with long hair and short insight. Today's incident seems to be nothing more than a fraud, but after a little research, you know that the water behind it is very deep. The mother-in-law has no vision, and she has to go into the muddy water herself. Then she can't help her elevated sense of importance. Elaine didn't know that Paul was kind, so she gave him a fierce look and said to Jack apologetically in the next second, "Mr. Jack, don't take it to heart if he says this rubbish. Auntie absolutely believes in you." Jack smiled triumphantly and said, "It's okay, Auntie, I won't be inferior to a wimp." Having said that, he immediately said vigorously, "Auntie, let's go over. It is good." Jack took Elaine through the crowd and stepped to the door of Harley Insurance Company. As soon as the two arrived at the door, he immediately said loudly to several employees who were blocking the door, "Go and tell your leader to immediately refund the money of these uncles and aunts, otherwise I will let the lawyer team and the public security organ intervene. At that time, you and your boss will be arrested." Elaine also echoed from the side, "Have you heard, you dogs? We are supported now. If your scam company does not refund the money, be careful that young Mr. Blue is sending you all to prison." The young employee at the head was a little nervous and hurriedly said, "I'm sorry, I'm just a security guard, and I'm not responsible for the specific business." Jack said coldly, "Then call your boss and tell him that I am Jack Blue of the Aurous Hill royal family. Let him come and deal with it personally, otherwise, he will face the consequences." While speaking, Jack's face was full of arrogance. Although the Blue family is not the top in Aurous Hill, it is at least medium. The boss of a scam company, after hearing his name, would be scared, right? The young employee didn't know his depth and was a little scared, so he immediately called his boss. At this time, in the office of the chairman of Harley Insurance Company, the boss Harley Zhou was serving a middle-aged man in his 40s with a stern face. He smiled all over his face, took out a bank card from the drawer, handed it over respectfully, and said, "Fifth Lord, there are 30 million in this card. The password is your birthday. This is your share of the dividends." The middle-aged man, dressed in a Thompson suit, looked a bit stern, but his eyes were not angry, just majestic, and his aura was impressive. If there were other people present, they would definitely recognize him. He was Orvel Hong. In the entire Aurous Hill, everyone knows that Orvel Hong is the underground emperor here, and no one dares to mess with him. Orvel Hong looked at Harley Zhou, smiled approvingly, and said, "Harley Zhou, I didn't expect you to be so capable." "Good, good." Harley Zhou hurriedly said, "Fifth Lord, what about the troublesome crowd downstairs?" Orvel Hong said indifferently, "A bunch of old people, don't care about them. If they don't listen to you, I will arrange for the brethren to come over and teach them a lesson." Harley Zhou breathed a sigh of relief and hurriedly said, "Thank you, Lord Orvel." Orvel Hong smiled and said, "In the future, just go ahead with this kind of business. As long as you can make money, I will help you with anything." Harley Zhou was pleasantly surprised and humbled himself, saying, "Thank you, Lord Orvel. With your support, I will continue to work harder and we will make a fortune together." Harley Zhou doesn't have a deep background in Aurous Hill, but he has one advantage: he has a good mind and can find crooked ways to make money. He engaged in financial management and defrauded money. Knowing that he could not handle such a large amount of money alone, he asked Orvel for help, provided part of the illegal income to Orvel, and sought asylum from him. With Orvel Hong calling the shots in Aurous Hill, he would naturally be safe and sound. With Orvel Hong as his backer, he had no worries about the future, and his fraudulent business was flourishing. Just when Harley Zhou was excited about his connection with Orvel, his subordinates called and said urgently, "Boss, something has happened. There is a guy who claims to be the young master of the Blue family, Jack Blue. He's demanding money immediately, otherwise, he will send you to prison." "Damn, what about this?" Harley Zhou frowned and hurriedly said to Orvel Hong, "Orvel, there is a man who claims to be from the Aurous Hill Blue family downstairs, leading a group of old men and old ladies to make trouble. He said that he dominates Aurous Hill. He wants us to return all the money we collected, or we will be sent to prison." Harley Zhou deliberately exaggerated to provoke Orvel Hong. As he spoke, he bent down again and begged, "Fifth Lord, the Blue family has some power in Aurous Hill. If they hold a grudge, I really can't afford to offend them. Please take action to help me through this difficulty." "The King of Aurous Hill?" Orvel Hong snorted and said, "The little Blue family is not even a feather in my eyes. Even if the head of the family sees me, they have to bow down and salute. Now their junior dares to provoke me?" After that, Orvel Hong put Harley Zhou's bank card into his pocket and said coldly, "Let's go. I want to see what kind of lifeless fool he is." Orvel Hong only takes money, no one dares to ask me to return it. Jack Blue stood at the door of Harley Insurance Company with a proud face. He knew that today was a good opportunity for him to show off his strength in front of Cynthia's mother, and he must do it well. As long as the mother is dealt with, why worry about the daughter? When the time comes, he will be able to take Cynthia, a famous beauty in Aurous Hill, into his bag, and he was excited thinking about it. So he said loudly, "Uncles and aunts, please rest assured, the boss of this scam company will come over and refund everyone soon." When everyone heard this, they immediately applauded, one by one, all excited and intolerably happy. Only Paul looked at Jack with a sneer on his face. This guy took himself too seriously, and he was afraid that he would die later. When Jack held his chin up and enjoyed the respect of everyone, the door of Harley Insurance Company was suddenly pushed open from the inside. They saw the boss Harley Zhou walking out together with a middle-aged man wearing a Thompson suit. Although the middle-aged man was a bit older, he had an amazing aura. It was Orvel Hong. Behind Orvel Hong, there were several strong men who followed closely. These were all his personal bodyguards, each one with extraordinary strength. Orvel Hong's status was too high, so although many people in Aurous Hill knew his name well, they had no chance to see him, so no one, including Jack, recognized him. Everyone just recognized Harley Zhou, the boss of Harley Insurance. Then the atmosphere in the crowd exploded instantly. Jack really called Mr. Zhou over. He is really amazing. Yes, thanks to Sister Elaine this time, we have hope for our money. Sister Elaine, such a good young man, he is definitely a good candidate to be a son-in-law 1,000 times over. Elaine listened to the flattery of these old sisters and was overjoyed. This Jack Blue really helped her to show off in front of a group of old ladies today. Thinking of this, she smiled even more, looking at Jack with eyes full of satisfaction. At this time, Jack walked forward triumphantly, with a lofty posture. He did not know Harley Zhou, nor did he know Orvel Hong, but Harley Zhou seemed to respect Orvel Hong, so he mistook Orvel Hong for his boss. So, he looked at Orvel Hong and said proudly, "Are you the boss of Harley Insurance Company?" Orvel Hong said with a faint smile, "The boss is not me. I just help the boss. But if you have anything, you can tell me." Jack suddenly realized and then smiled disdainfully, "A subordinate? You are not worthy of talking to me. Get out of here and let your boss come." Paul shook his head and looked at Jack like an idiot. The man in the Thompson suit in front of him was amazing, and he had his subordinates following him. At first glance, he was someone not to be trifled with, but Jack ridiculed him so arrogantly, obviously seeking his own downfall. Elaine on the side also sneered and agreed, "Don't talk nonsense with this kind of person, the one next to him is the boss of Harley Insurance." Harley Zhou was dumbfounded. This Jack Blue and this old woman were so courageous. They even dared to insult Orvel Hong as a street dog and told him to go away. They really didn't know how to spell the word danger. In the whole of Aurous Hill, who would dare to insult Orvel Hong so boldly? At the moment when Jack's voice fell, a strong subordinate behind Orvel Hong immediately took a step forward, grabbed Jack's hair, and slapped him from left to right. "You shit! You dare to scold Orvel Hong, are you a god?" After finishing speaking, he grabbed Elaine, slapped her with a loud slap, and cursed, "Smelly lady, dare to scold Orvel Hong? Believe it or not, I will tear your mouth open." Boom! When these words came out, both Jack and Elaine were struck by lightning. What? The man in the Thompson suit in front of them is actually the famous Orvel Hong of Aurous Hill? And they were insulting him recklessly just now? Thinking of this, the faces of the two of them became extremely pale in an instant, cold sweat broke out on their bodies, and they were scared to death. Jack reacted the fastest. He thumped and knelt directly in front of Orvel Hong. While kowtowing, he cried and pleaded, "Fifth Lord, I was wrong. I apologize to you. I was blind and didn't recognize you. I opened my mouth to scold you. These damn old men and old ladies have nothing to do with me. Please, please spare my life." After he finished speaking, he knelt down, slapped himself, and apologized again. He broke down and cried. He really didn't expect that the one backing the boss of this scam company was actually the famous Orvel Hong of Aurous Hill. Such a big man, let alone him, can't be offended even with his whole family behind him. He regrets now and wants to die. He just wanted to take this opportunity to offer Cynthia's mother a courtesy, so that he has the opportunity to contact Cynthia. Unexpectedly, before he got his wish, he would offend Orvel Hong to death. If his father knew about this, wouldn't he kill him? At this scene, the group of grandparents around was shocked. They also expected Jack to help them get the money back, but who would have thought that in the next second, he would kneel directly on the ground and apologize to the man in the Thompson suit before him. And Elaine, who was quite proud just now, was now slapped a few times, embarrassed like a dead dog. Orvel Hong snorted coldly and said to the people around him, "Since this guy has such a cheap mouth, you will give him 10,000 slaps in turn." Jack was so frightened hearing the 10,000 slaps in the face, he thought he'd be beaten to death. At this time, Orvel Hong's men pointed to Elaine, who was beaten up and spread out, and blurted out, "Fifth Lord, what about this lady witch?" Orvel Hong glanced at Elaine in disgust and said lightly, 10,000 too. Elaine knelt on the ground with a frightened puff, and her whole body trembled violently. She was almost scared to death. She provoked Mr. Orvel, so can she still live? At this moment, several of his subordinates stood up, some grabbed Jack and some grabbed Elaine, and immediately prepared to move their hands. Paul had been watching this scene coldly in the crowd. When he saw his mother-in-law being beaten, he didn't want to intervene, because his mother-in-law has always been so cheap, it should be a lesson to her. However, if Orvel Hong's men slap her 10,000 times, if they don't beat her to death, they will at least maim her. Then how can he explain to his wife? It would be very painful for his wife too. He felt that he had no choice but to intervene. Just when a brawny man stretched his arms and was about to draw a mark on Elaine's old face fiercely, Paul hurried forward and grabbed his wrist. Join me next Wednesday for episode 4 of this captivating story. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. What do you think would happen next? Drop your comments below.